jika perut saya tidak boleh kena air, jahitan itu ditampal. Maka soalan ini menanyakan seorang wanita mengalami sakit ini di bahagian perut dan mengalami pembedahan di hospital. Jadi apabila pembedahan itu dilakukan, perutnya dijahit. Perutnya dijahit. Ini apa yang saya faham daripada soalan. Perutnya dijahit setelah pembedahan. Dan pada ketika itu dia dalam keadaan haid. Sekarang dia sudah suci daripada haid. Jadi soalan menanyakan bagaimana dia nak mandi hadas besar dan bagaimana dia nak membasuh tempat pembedahan tadi. Ini adalah soalannya. Maka jawapannya adalah, kalau sekiranya seseorang itu dia mengalami kesakitan seperti ini dan air tidak boleh kena kepada bahagian yang sakit, air tidak boleh kena kepada bahagian jahitan, jadi apa yang diwajibkan ke atas ni adalah membasuh bahagian yang dia mampu basuh. Membasuh yang di bahagian yang dia mampu basuh. Yang ini misalan, kalau jahitan itu ada di bahagian perut, maka dia basuh bahagian yang dia boleh basuh, seperti kepala, badan yang lain, kaki, tangan dan sebagainya. Dan dia mengelakkan membasuh bahagian yang sakit. Dan apa yang dilakukan adalah dia melakukan tayamum. Tayamum ini menggantikan tempat yang dia tidak boleh basuh. Ini yang sepatutnya dia melakukan. Jadi dia mandi hadas ini seperti biasa, dan bagi bahagian yang tidak boleh kena air, dia menggantikannya dengan tayamum. Jadi saya rasa tidak ada masalah, mudah ini untuk difahami. Begitu juga dengan orang yang ada bandage. Doktor mengatakan dia tak boleh buka bandage. Jadi bagaimana dia nak mandi hadas besar? Dia mandi seperti biasa, dan apabila dia sudah habis mandi hadas besar, maka dia melakukan tayamum bagi bahagian yang disaluti, yang bandage. Sebab air ini tidak boleh kena kepada bahagian yang ini tersebut. And the question is asking, a person undergo operation and the part of the stomach is sewn, and water cannot be at this particular part because of this ailment. So the person is asking, how does she bathe the obligatory bath? So she bathe as per normal. She wash the body parts, other body parts. When comes to the part where she cannot wash, she does tayammum. So the tayammum it takes the place of the body part that cannot be washed. Soalan yang kedua menanyakan, Assalamualaikum Ustaz. Waalaikumsalam. Saya berpuasa qada Ramadan dan saya gantikan pada hari Isnin dan Khamis. Boleh saya juga puasa pada hari putih? Yang soalan menanyakan satu orang dia nak melakukan qada bulan Ramadan. Dalam masa yang sama dia juga puasa Isnin dan Khamis dan hari-hari putih. Hari putih ini ada 13, 14, 15 daripada tiap-tiap bulan. Jadi adakah dibolehkan dia melakukan qada dan sekaligus melakukan puasa sunat ini? Ini adalah, kita ada khilaf ulama berkenaan dengan adakah puasa yang wajib boleh dicantumkan dengan puasa yang sunnah. Pendapat yang pilih dalam mazhab dibolehkan. Yani kalau kita ada puasa qada, kita melakukan pada hari Isnin, maka kita niat kita puasa qada dan puasa sunat di hari Isnin. Puasa qada dan puasa sunat hari Isnin. InsyaAllah kita mendapatkan sah bagi puasa qada, dan juga kita berpahala bagi puasa hari Isnin. Akan tetapi pahalanya tidak sama dengan orang yang membezakannya, yakni qada dan dia melakukan puasa hari Isnin dengan sendirinya. Dalam segi pahala, tentu sekali orang yang melakukan 2 kali puasa, pahalanya lebih daripada orang yang melakukan 1 kali puasa dengan dia mencantumkan niat. Question is asking about a person yang does qada for Ramadan. Is it permissible to combine the sunnah fast of Monday and Thursday and the white days? Yes, it is permissible. It is permissible, but in terms of virtue, it's not the same as a person who fasts independently on those days. Soalan yang seterusnya menanyakan, Assalamualaikum Ustaz. Waalaikumsalam. I am a giver. I have some Muslim members of my family who can trigger my depression and anxiety like crazy. I stayed away from visiting them this Hari Raya, not breaking any bond with them, but just for my mental sanity, I cannot be around them. The emotional pain can be very intense, and other darker emotions can surface later when I'm on my own. From an Islamic perspective, how does one deal with such situation or staying any away from such members of the family? Haram. Question is asking a person and he has some issues with the other family members, and he is saying that he avoid to visit them during the Hari Raya gatherings, and this is because to abstain from being into depression. As what the question is asking, that there is a high tendency that he will enter into anxiety and depression being with those family members. So is it permissible for him not to attend those Hari Raya gatherings? It depends on the situation. And if a person felt any severe harm in doing a particular thing, it is not compulsory upon him to do that. It is not compulsory. But at the same time also, it is not permissible to cut off the ties with the family members. So the advice is, we do not cut the ties with family members. There is no harm from staying away from them to avoid harm from them. There is no harm for him to avoid to be close with those family members and to avoid any harm. But at the same time also, it is not permissible for him to cut off the ties. So I hope it is clear, inshallah. So there is a difference between cutting off ties and staying away. Why stay away? Stay away because of harm. Because some people, they always cause harm to others. If you be with them, they will harm you. So what is the solution? Do not be with these people. Do not be with these people. But it doesn't mean not being with them that we cut off our relationship with them. It doesn't mean that if you have bad friends that you do not sit around with them. It doesn't mean that you cut off your relationship with them. So there is a difference between being with a person and cutting off any relationship with a person. So if a person felt harm with the company of such, then he should not be in their company, but at the same time also not cutting any of ties. Assalamualaikum. Waalaikumsalam. I'm wondering, my child is 13 years old. She is a special needs child with quadriplegic cerebral palsy, not aware of anything and no physical ability to move herself. Her feeding is also compromised and food goes through the stomach directly. 100% reliant on her caregivers. I know she is excused from fasting, praying. However, her menstrual cycle began 2 years back. Question: do I need to pay fidya for her for the past 2 years? If yes, how do I calculate it? In this question, it is asking that she has a daughter, 13 years old, and the daughter is suffering from this disease. This is a strange disease. In a way, she is saying that the daughter has no ability to move by herself. And likewise, no ability to feed herself, dependent on people to feed her. So the question is asking that if she enters into puberty, is it compulsory upon her to pay the fidya, or upon the parents to pay the fidya for the fasting that she did not perform? So the thing is this, this is the thing that we have to understand. The question that we ask is, this person is mukallaf or not mukallaf? Mukallaf meaning in terms of the mental state. Is she mentally sane or mentally conscious? This is the question. If a person is afflicted by a particular disease, the disease can be so bad that she cannot move by herself. She is dependent on the parents for food and drink and so on and so forth. But if she is mentally stable, in the sense that she possesses the intellect, the intelligence, that she is able to differentiate any things, we are able to communicate with her. She is able to understand what we are saying. She is able to digest any information. So when we say that she is mentally stable, that she is able to differentiate what is good and what is bad. So she is a mukallaf. She is a mukallaf, meaning if she is a mukallaf, the obligations of prayers and fasting is upon her. The obligations and prayers and fasting is upon her. But if she is in a state where she is not mentally stable, that she cannot differentiate things, or not in a state of consciousness at all times, then she is not a mukallaf. If you say she is not a mukallaf, then prayers and fasting is not compulsory. And if fasting is not compulsory upon her, fidya is also not compulsory. Because fidya is only compulsory to people who are obliged to perform any fasting. But in this case, if she is not obliged to fast, then there is no point of paying the fidya. So the question again, is she mentally conscious? Does she possess that intellect that she is able to differentiate things, and able to respond and understand conversations, and able to study and learn? Then she is a mukallaf. Because I do not know what kind of disease this is. So this is the question that we ask. If she is a mukallaf, meaning she is mentally stable, then all the obligations comes in. If she cannot fast then we have to pay fidya. The family members has to pay the fidya for her. Wallahu alam. Next question is asking, Assalamualaikum Ustaz, wa alaikum assalam. My son is in secular primary school. He is awkward or maybe shy to pray Zohor in the student care center, where there are a lot of non-Muslim friends. I have already asked the teacher in charge and they said okay, can pray. However, my son is not confident as he is the only Muslim in that after school care. If he does not pray there, he will miss Zohor as we fetch at 5 p.m. How to tackle this? Question is asking, a person is asking that he or she has a son who is in the primary school, and she plays the son in after school care, and it is a non-Muslim place. There are many non-Muslim students, so the son is shy to perform the Zohar prayers. So the question is asking, what can the parents do in this situation? Because the child is shy to pray in front of the non-Muslim friends in the after school care. If the child does not pray in the center, then he will miss the Zohar prayers. So the advice I will give is to always encourage the child about the importance of prayers. The importance of prayers. Always speak to our children about the virtues of prayers. The virtues of prayers, the importance of prayers. And I would like to recommend the book Fadail A'mal by Maulana Zakaria Kandahlawi. Fadail A'mal by Maulana Zakaria Kandahlawi. He mentioned a particular chapter on the virtues of prayers. The virtues of prayers. So what I will advise the parents is to read with the child on the virtues of prayers. See how the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the Tabi'in, how they perform prayers, how Allah help them and assist them. So the iman of the child is boost. Because the actual problem is iman. A person is shy from performing the obligation. So by right, if a person is a mu'min and iman and he has developed, no matter what happens, we will perform the prayers. So we are in need to always remind ourselves and always to encourage our children to perform the obligations, and one of the ways is always to incur and to speak to them about virtues. Remember, this is important, and to speak about fada'il. Wallahu a'lam bis-shawab. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali sayyidina Muhammad. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.